Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
Hello all, my name is Eero with the North American Sauna Society. I'm so glad to say that we are hitting soon 2,000 viewers/listeners. So this is great. There must be clearly an opening for traditional sauna bathing talk. And with me today is Sam.
Hey everyone, Sam Wacha here. Thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode of The Upper Bench. I'm going to turn it over to Risto to introduce our guest.
Hi, gentlemen. Good to see you again. And I'm excited for this episode where we talk about sauna in Vermont. And we're joined by two of my sauna friends, Nils Shenholm and Devin Colman. I've sauned with Devin before, not with Nils yet, hopefully one of these days soon. And so they're going to share with us about what's going on in Vermont. What's the sauna culture like there? What are some interesting happenings? And I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Nils.
Thanks. Great to be here. So I came back here from after finishing college to live full-time in '82. Worked for a while in the generic building industry, taught for a while at a building school, and then started this in the sauna business in 1986, designing a sauna for my family here where I live in Duxbury. Started to realize after building it that other people might be interested in having one like it. And in 1990, I fired up my first prototype. 93, I became a dealer for Hilo, now Sauna 360, and have two product lines, a log sauna kit, which is a kit, 5-inch by 5-inch cedar logs, and also the shop built stuff that I'm doing. So I've been in the business for a long time, and I definitely have lots of stories to tell about the sauna culture here in a state that's, like Minnesota, the Upper Peninsula, and Finland, cold in the winter. I mean, winters here can be really tough if you're not interested in going with the flow. And then I met Devin through a project he was doing for the State Historic Preservation Office, which was really, really interesting. And in fact, we had some out of town sauna royalty visiting, and what Devin can tell you about him. And our trip to the old, some Savu saunas in southern Vermont. Devin.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Devin, and I live up in northwestern Vermont in Burlington on Lake Champlain, and came to Vermont in 2004 for graduate school and been here ever since. I grew up in Minnesota. And that was my first sauna experience. Grew up with a bunch of Finns and Swedes, so very familiar cultural. I myself have zero Finnish heritage, but it's something that I've really gained an appreciation of over the years. And in my professional life, I'm an architectural historian, and part of what I do is research and document buildings throughout the state of Vermont. And a couple of years ago, as Nils mentioned, started a project to try to track down some of these Finnish saunas that are in rural Vermont, and surprisingly found a fair number. So we can talk about that more later on. But the most recently, I've just finished building my own sauna in my basement, my house here in Burlington. So I finally have my own place to sauna whenever I feel like it, which is great.
Great, welcome guys. Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. Devin, yeah, tell me about your DIY sauna in your basement. What'd you decide to go with? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny origin story. I was meeting with some people looking at their old house, as I do, and they just purchased it, and there was a sauna in the garage, and they kind of offhand comment said, "Oh, we're gonna throw that away," which my ears perked up, and I said, "Really?" And I looked at it, and it was a kit, wall panels, and it could all be disassembled. And so I talked to him a little more and said, "If you're really just going to trash that, I'll take it off your hands." And they said, "It's all yours." So he rented a U-Haul truck and took it apart and stacked up the panels. And I mean, it had walls, ceiling, benches, an ancient stove that was no good. I took that too and scrapped it. But
Perfect.
it sat in my garage for a couple of years while we planned our basement fit out, and finally got it all put together. From what I could figure, I think it was manufactured in the mid-90s.
Sure.
But it was good construction, nice cedar inside and out, solid benches, and got a new Hilo heater through Nils. And we fired it up about 3 months ago, and it's been great.
Excellent. Well, yeah, no, nothing beats the home one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that at Camp du Nord, where we met and sauna'd. So it's cool to hear that you have yours up and running, and now I'm without a sauna. So I need to get back on the ball.
Yeah.
Same here. Yeah. I need to get back on the ball as well. So, Devin, do you think that you growing up in Minnesota had something to do with your interest in sauna, or?
Yeah, definitely. And Risto just mentioned Camp du Nord, which is a YMCA family camp up in northern Minnesota. Ely is the town right on the edge of the Boundary Waters. And I grew up, my family actually camped there. And then as high school and college, spent every summer on staff there. And what's really neat is that the camp was built in the 1920s. And the core group of original buildings was built by Finnish carpenters who lived, northern Minnesota is full of Finns. And these guys in the 20s built traditional log cabins and lodges and a sauna, which is right on the edge of the lake. Just beautiful, big timber construction. And that was really my first introduction to sauna, other than the YMCA, which I don't really count. So it's funny, it was always called, I think there's a sign on it that says Finnish sauna. But it wasn't until later that I really that means actually, there's a tradition and a history here of a cultural practice that I didn't appreciate initially, but now I've really come to admire. And through my architectural research, I think it's really interesting that there's this building type, a method of construction and a form of building and a cultural practice that are so closely linked. And the only comparable example I can have been able to think of is the Japanese tea house, where there's a very important cultural tradition and practice that takes place in a very specifically designed and built structure. But otherwise, I haven't been able to come up with other traditions like this in which the site and the building are so intricately linked with the cultural practice. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really, really an interesting aspect of it.
I am with the Finlandia Foundation, and I don't know if you know Frank Eld.
Sure.
Because he's the man also, one of the many, but he's been studying, as far as I can tell, a lot. I hope I'm not hijacking this discussion, but I've known Nils, I've known you for close to 20 years now, right?
Yep.
And you started volunteering like super early with the North American Sauna Society.
That's right.
So it's just like, what's your story? Why did you come, you told about that a little, but how come you got so crazy that you started working on saunas, besides, your own?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my heritage is Swedish. I was born here, but my heritage is Swedish. So the sort of genesis story for me, some of you know this, I think. I was working on a project nearby in a beautiful home that was being renovated, and there was an modern electric sauna in the basement level that was being taken out and then redone. And the fellow that was the foreman on the job was a friend of mine. When they took all the boards and doors and everything out of it and the heater, said to the crew one day, well, we have this stuff. We're not going to put this in the dumpster. This is going to get reused. Is anyone interested? And nobody on his crew had any interest. I was working as a sub. I was doing the kitchen and built-in furniture in the living room. And I sort of stood there because I didn't really feel like it was up to me to answer Jake that I would be interested in. And I kind of waited and no one else did. So I finally said, yeah, I'm interested. And he said, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, obviously I'd build a sauna, because that's what we're going to do with this stuff. And that turned out to be an interesting little turn. But when I built the first one here, started working on the design in 86, started building it in 88. I didn't finish it till January 1990. It took time because I was busy doing other stuff. I realized then that there was a lot more to it than a structure comprised of boards and windows and doors and nails and siding. And that the culture was not only very important, but also fit in a very obvious integral way to life here in a state where winters are long and it's cold and it's dark. And we're at about 44 north latitude. Helsinki's at 60, I think. So the people that live in that part of the world have a much darker winter than we do, but and a brighter summer too. Don't forget. But having this in my life was a game changer. And one of the things that's interesting about being in the business of designing and building these rooms and buildings is that you tend to meet people that get it. And it's much more than, I think something Devin just said about the importance of the iconography and the cultural importance of a log building that has a very specific use, even though, of course, sauna on the farm in Finland and other northern countries had multi-purposes. But that one purpose was very integral to making life manageable in a very tough climate. And in the farms in Finland, I bear in mind, I'm not Finnish. I have spent time there. I've done lots of reading, but I'm not making any claims about my connection to the culture in Finland. But I can say unequivocally that most of the population of Finland until not that long ago, probably sometime after World War II, lived in a pretty, in many cases, difficult circumstances. Certainly people that lived in the forests, people who were in agriculture, it wasn't an easy time. Same thing is true of Vermont. There's so many similarities between the culture and landscape here, the way people made a living, and the culture and landscape there, and the way people made a living. And then, of course, this ties back into Devin's project, which Frank joined us on. He was the VIP guest I was mentioning, which is where the first time I met him. But having that culture here, makes it a full circle. I don't imagine life without it. I would go bananas. And I own 2 saunas. I've got one here at my house and I have another one up north on a piece of land I own. Both wood fired. And you're all welcome. Actually, Devin's been to mine here several times, but
Yeah, it's great.
yeah. So I'm in it up to my neck, Eero. When I found out about the reinvigoration of the NAS, I got on a plane. I mean, I was very keen to learn and also pitch in.
Well, you'll
So-
be, go ahead.
Yeah, so those just getting back to those old saunas, I'd be curious to know more about them. I have so many questions. You know, I might start with like, how many have you found and looked at? What was the one or few that you looked at with Frank? Can you kind of give us a picture of what those old saunas are like in Vermont?
Yeah, definitely. It was in the actual origin of the project. Yeah, I still go back to northern Minnesota every summer. My family has a place up there, and the little town of Embarrass, Minnesota, has an incredible collection of finished log buildings. Many of which have been preserved, and you can do little tours of them. And I was doing one of those tours and looking around, and suddenly thought to myself, like, boy, this is a lot like central Vermont. Kind of, you know, really marginal farming, you know, a really rocky soil, dense forest, and cold, you know, long winters. And that was really the first thought that, well, you know, if there were Finns here, there must have been Finns in Vermont. And so I came home from vacation and put out a few feelers, and lo and behold, I found there were in a, you know, primarily clustered in a few adjacent towns in kind of central southern Vermont. And we, you know, I started doing some outreach, and sort of, you know, it's all about the network, and you find the one person who's kind of the key holder, the secret decoder for all the other people who know stuff. And I found that lady, and she was the descendant of Finnish immigrants, and Eva-Lisa Suonen was her name. And she was the one who said, I know where they are, and I know who to talk to. And so with her help, then we organized a little road trip going around, and Frank came out on one of those trips. And all in all, through multiple trips, we identified about 25 saunas, and, you know, ranging from almost collapsed to still functioning. Only 1 or 2 were really still in use. The others were basically, you know, being used as storage sheds, outbuildings, really not in active use, and hadn't been for some time, but they're still there. And what became really fun was kind of understanding the genesis of these these farmsteads, which were not Finnish farmsteads. They were Yankee farmsteads. These are farms established in the 1800s by New England settlers. And what happened was, in the early 20th century, as farming transitioned out of New England into the Midwest, those Vermont farmers went with it, and they left behind their farmsteads. There's a debate as to whether they were, you know, vacant farmsteads or abandoned farmsteads, but it was available land. And the Finns, another interesting point was that the Finns who settled in Vermont were not coming from Finland. Vermont was kind of their second stop. They had settled first out west in Idaho, Wyoming, working in the mines and timbering, or other parts of New England. Fitchburg, Massachusetts was a big population center. And they were coming to Vermont from those other locations in the United States and settling in Vermont. And I think largely because they could buy land on these vacant farmsteads, and the land came with a farmhouse, a barn, outbuildings, chicken coops, smokehouse, and so on, tillable acreage. And the one thing that was missing, of course, was the sauna. So that's what they built. That's the physical remnant of the Finnish settlers in Vermont, is the sauna. And I play a little game with myself now whenever I drive through that part of the state, peering around behind the house about 100 yards and find the little building with a door and a chimney. And oh, there's another one. Jot down the address. And so it's been a really interesting project. In terms of design and construction, the majority are stick built dimensional lumber. A lot of time, what they had available. These are by no means grand, fancy, health resort spa saunas. These are, working buildings, but built on the traditional plan with a warming room and then the bathing room. Lots of different types of homemade wood stoves, some, barrel stoves, and all sorts of piles of rocks and you name it. But there were 3 examples that we found that are traditional log construction, and those were really exciting to find. And they are, you could easily just go to Finland and see the exact same thing. One of them especially is a beautiful interlocking, notch double dovetail joinery on the corners. And Frank looked at it and just shook his head and said, well, this guy was showing off. It's so perfect. So those were really nice to document and talk to the owners. And, some knew what they had and some didn't. So it's interesting to kind of spread the knowledge around.
The variety of stoves was pretty interesting. They had, as Devin just said, the sort of the homemade back together steel version. There was one light frame construction one that I remember with the roof is falling in, and it was as I recall, it was a purpose-built sauna stove, what we would call a modern sauna stove. It looked like it might have been made in the 50s or 60s. But in the shape and general conformation of what we still have today. And then the couple of, I think there were a couple logs, Savu saunas, I think, at least 1 or 2. And then there was one that I remember that had a really amazing masonry stove. It was huge.
Yes.
And that's the one, actually the owner of that one got back in touch with me and said, listen, can you help me? We got to keep this thing. And it was the situation that happens often, sadly, with farm property. We have a beautiful barn with a slate roof on it, but boy, to put a new foundation under it, it's going to cost you some money. And I don't think this family really had the means to come up with the funds or the means to go to bat and get grants to do the work. But that was an amazing, beautiful sauna that I think had, Devin can corroborate this, but I think both rooms were paneled with what we would today call sheetrock and painted. And that sheetrock was old enough, it's all full of asbestos, man, So
yeah, probably a transite board of some sort.
Yeah. But gosh darn it, the stove was just about beautiful. It was really nice.
And so are you documenting these photographically? And are these available yet? Have you published your book?
Nils keeps bugging me about that. No. So what we did was a basic survey form, gathering historical information, ownership information, a rough sketch, measured drawing of the plan. Because part of what I wanted to figure out was, how similar are these in terms of dimensions of the 2 spaces? Where are the heaters placed? And overall, they're pretty consistent. But eventually that will all be compiled with the photographs into a final survey report. that'll kind of give an overview of the process and what we found. So, and speaking of the stoves, you know, there really was a large variety. There were some that were, I remember two that were kind of built off, the sauna building is built off of a hillside. So it's open underneath. And that's actually where the stove was, down below. So you feed it from below, and then the heat would come up. And that huge one that Nils was referencing, I think actually had a bowl or kettle set in the top that you'd fill with water, and that would generate the steam. Some were, you know, fed inside the sauna, some were fed from the warming room, some from outside. So all those little differences were really interesting to see how people constructed them.
Well, that sounds like a fun project, guys. I'm jealous. I want to go on a road trip now. Are any of these, like you said, some of them are open tours? Is there anything up there that you recommend for any listeners that want to come to Vermont to sauna? Where should they go?
Well, boy, in terms of like traditional, you know, in a historic sauna, I don't know of any that are, you know, functioning for the public. I think most are the more contemporary, built and designed for public use. Nils could probably fill in on some of what's going on.
It's I would get, honestly, Sam, I don't think Vermont would make it on a map of places you'd want to go to take public sauna. Private saunas, yeah, there's some nice ones.
Sure.
If you want to, if you want to go on, this is going to hurt, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you want to go on a field trip and do some awesome resort sauna bathing, I could highly recommend Quebec. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them up there. You know, friends say, "Oh yeah, we're going to Montreal for the weekend," and my reply is always, "Yeah, that's great. It's like a whole different country." Well, guess what? Of course it is.
It is.
And those guys, the guys in Quebec that are doing this, get it. And it's remarkable how a line on a map can make such a difference. Where here in the States, as all of us know, public sauna generally are in a process of becoming more proper. Being as generous as I can. But I used to get emails fairly routinely. Dear sir, my wife and I will be vacationing in Vermont. We'd love to, if you could recommend somewhere where we could go to have a sauna. And they might be coming from Europe or from the US or from out West or, you know, whatever. And it was hard because there are resorts here, obviously, that have saunas. They tend to be built within or next to ski resorts, which we have many of because we still have a ski industry here. One of the nice things about a ski resort is it makes money in lots of different ways. So if you're a real estate developer, or if you're in the ski industry, which these days is kind of the same thing, and you want to have a nice facility. In fact, you know, these days, what people are trying to do is not just winter season. You want to do, you know, spring, summer, fall, winter, year-round family fun and recreation. If you want to do that, then of course you want to have a spa with a pool and a hot tub and a steam room and a sauna. So as a consequence, all of the public ones tend to be by ski resorts. There's a few exceptions. Woodstock has two, the Woodstock Inn and Stonehouse Spa, I believe it's called, in Queechee, really cool place. And you can go there and be a guest and get do a massage and so on and so on. And of course, the Woodstock Inn is a rock resort. That's a pretty nice facility. But the projects that I visited with Devin down in southern Vermont were all at people's homes on farms, and sadly, none of them were in functional shape. I have to say we're working on it. There are some public projects underway up here now, 2 that are in the news and 2 other ones that aren't in the news yet, where you could, presumably go and pay for a day visit to a spa.
What can you tell us a little bit more about that? What might sauna look like in the next year or 2 in Vermont? What kind of things are bubbling up?
Well, there's a group in our state capital, Montpelier, that started working on plans a few years ago, and as you might expect with a commercial project, had some issues with both property acquisition and permitting, so that kind of went on the back burner. But they've just recently gotten another piece of property in Montpelier, and they're going to work on a wellness center that it's going to include thermotherapy. And then the other one will be up in Burlington. And it's the same idea, privately financed public project that I've been peripherally involved with, and I'm hoping to actually work on at some point. They're still in the beginning stages. And then there's 2 other ones. I'm sorry?
Say you mentioned that both associated with wellness.
Yeah.
It seems like that's kind of the hook for sauna coming in is the one component of a larger, wellness retreat, wellness center type development.
We're slow to adopt.
Yeah.
What the Finns have known for thousands of years, we're finally getting a clue here.
So that's an excellent point. So let's scroll back a little. So we are talking about the historic background of the Finns moving as the second place to move to Vermont, and then we talk about the modern Vermont. And so there, some of our listeners / viewers are very new to authentic sauna bathing. So what's the connection between the historic background and what's happening today? Can we talk about, what these Finns used the saunas for, way back in the day, and how it evolves into the present day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'd say there's a direct connection between the Vermont Finns of the 20s and 30s and what's going on today, other than, in a rural state like Vermont, for the farming families, the time they see their neighbors and get together and visit is Friday night in the sauna. And I think now in 2023, there's a similar desire for real social interaction that's not on a screen or, just a Facebook feed or something. It's something that's real and true. I think that's probably the strongest link for the interest today. But I do, getting back to the cultural significance, I do kind of wonder sometimes, like, how much do people, is it just a fad? People think, oh, sauna is cool, until something new comes along, and they're not quite getting this centuries-long tradition of sauna bathing and the cultural connections. So I think that's part of the education we can do for people, not in a way of being elitist and trying to say you're doing it wrong, or shame on you if you don't know this, but helping them understand so they can appreciate it and enjoy it more. Because I think once you know the roots of it, I think it makes it even more enjoyable that you're part of this long continuum of traditional heating and cooling and bathing ritual.
Yeah. There's a lot of different reasons why people gravitate to this, and when you design and build stuff and become a dealer, and you're involved on every day, 7 days a week for a long time, you start to see some patterns. And the two patterns that come to mind that are relevant, one is the Nordic skiing community, which connects directly to Sweden and Finland and Norway, without any doubt at all. And when I first started working, I recall, and I have built saunas for people that were very established coaches, mentors, people that worked with teams, collegiate and national teams, frankly. So the Nordic ski community is one. The other is counterculture roots. The Vermont had a very strong, very well documented kind of back to the land movement, if you want to call it. That's sort of a cliche now, but in the 60s and 70s, and before then too, to some extent. And communities like that would obviously be looking for all kinds of alternative ways to do things. And I've lived without running water and without indoor plumbing more than many of you people that you guys know, because I lived here as a young guy, and that was what worked. So if you live in that way, having a place to bathe is kind of important. Beyond that, the demographics, change, right away. Today, my business is, I do a fair amount of commercial stuff, but I'm also doing, many of my projects are for second homeowners, people that have the means to add this element to their lives. That's
Yeah, Devin, I like how you phrased that, how you said that. It's not about elitism. It's about explaining to people and showing people that there's more, there's more that they could have in the buffet of sauna. They don't, there's more than just one little tiny narrow spectrum.
Kind of broaden and enrich the experience.
Yeah. And Nils, you've mentioned a few times, and we've mentioned in this conversation, log saunas. And I would be remiss to have a conversation with you if we didn't give you the chance to give the sales pitch for log saunas. Log saunas are a rare thing, even amongst Finnish communities these days. I mean, they do exist in some areas, but could you tell people, what's your sales pitch? Why would someone consider a log sauna?
I don't have a sales pitch. The sales pitch is that this is a whole other chapter of my weird business model. People look at my websites and say, "Dude, your website's really crappy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And they say, "Well, why don't you, spend a couple $1,000 and make it better?" And I was like, "Well, why do I want to do that? I can't keep up as it is. I'm busy, so spending money on marketing, it's kind of doesn't make any sense." But the first log sauna I did was for a second homeowner. They lived in Massachusetts. They had a place in the town of Jamaica, Vermont, which is down by a very large and well-known ski resort called Stratton Mountain. And I honestly, Christopher, it's been so long, I can't remember why they ended up with a log sauna. But that was the first one I did. That was in 1995 or 1996. The house was not log. But I will say, one of the things that I thank my lucky stars for every day is you're creating. I go back a step. I built a bunch of those over the years in the shop, deliver them on a truck. Those are nearby. About 3 years ago, I started doing log kits, which is a kit that you assemble. You and your family assemble it, or you and your brother-in-law, who's a carpenter, assembles it, or you hire someone to help you. But I think the pitch part is that it's an obvious direct link to one of probably the oldest and longest lived traditional way to build a sauna, even though it's got a modern stove. And the way the building reacts, the way the walls breathe, is, I think, very different than the way a light frame construction building will. I remember conversations with other builder friends. At the end of the day, you could take one of my log saunas and grind it up in little bits and eat it on toast. I mean, there's nothing, everything about the building is organic, if you want to use that term. And for me, another selling point, sales pitch here, is I do business primarily with 3 local sawmills for my stuff. And doing business with small sawmills, you guys have these in Minnesota. I don't believe there's any sawmills down in Eero's neighborhood, but
No. True.
it's like I'm doing business with a family-run operation. It's like farming. They depend on the weather. They depend on their truckers and their loggers, and it's a very, very diverse and complex web of supply, from the stump, the landowner, to the stump, to the truck, to the logger, to the sawmill, and then the final product. But at the end of the day, I'm shipping 2 kits in the next 3 weeks. 99% of that stuff came from within 50 miles a year, and I like that.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about supply chain in China affecting that piece of your business.
Well, actually, that's true. Although we're now having issues with forestry regulations. I mean, the logging industry in the United States is in trouble. I think nationally, fuel costs, labor costs, and I'm all for regulation and conservation rules, but it adds up. And if you're a logger, it's a tough road. It really is. I don't know. I think Devin probably might have some information about this too, but the last time I picked up 1,000 feet of lumber from my local, I mean, it's basically I packed the back of my pickup truck. It's pretty funny. I had a conversation with one of the sons, and they're seeing difficulties. So if you live near a sawmill, buy lumber from them, because if you don't, that mill's going to go away.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear what you say. What you're saying is like there's a tie to the past. I'm going to be your marketing guy for a little bit here. A tie to the
Cool,
past.
you're hired.
Hey, I'll take it. Simplicity of build. There's an elegant simplicity in the log build, and sustainability. You're able to get wood from your local area, which I'd love to see us do that in the sauna world. But then I would also say, for me, having experienced a bunch of different saunas, including Camp du Nord's, which is a log sauna, there's a different feel to a log sauna. It's not just about like, oh, I love traditional things, therefore I want a log sauna.
Yeah.
A lot of wood mass there to absorb the heat over time, and then gently radiate that back to the sauna bather. For me, it's the best quality of heat in a sauna that I've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, Nils, I would add, it just came to mind that Vermonters are pretty familiar with log construction. There's a strong tradition of the Adirondack lodges, which are big log construction, different from Finnish tight joinery, but that concept of using heavy timber to build, notching the corners and building a structure, and then also heating with wood. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of Vermonters still heat all winter with wood. They've got the wood stove, they stack up their couple cords in the spring and summer, and then that's literally how they heat their houses all winter. So I think there's kind of an inherent understanding that this will work, and
Yeah.
log construction and wood heat works. So
When I talk to people that right out of the gate, they say, we want 200 degrees. We want 210 degrees. Or the Russian friends that I've worked for. Yeah, we want like 230, can you do that? I was like, sure, it's going to be wood heat. That's it. End of conversation. You're not going to do electric heat. This is America, wood heat. But the other one that comes up, this is, Devin, interesting. People say, well, log, that sounds cool. How long does it take to heat up? And I say, well, it takes a little longer. And it's interesting, some people really kind of trip over that. Instead of 45 minutes to an hour, it might be an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 45 minutes. It depends on a lot of different things. But we do, I know how long it takes my automatic coffee maker to make coffee. It's between 5 and 6 minutes. You could set your watch by it. And that I'm used to that. Unless I'm doing espresso, which is different, or if I'm doing pour over, which is different. But my daily thing is an automatic drip coffee thing that real coffee people think is unbearable shortcut. But we are in a culture that expects predictable time. We got to get the kids to school. Somebody's got piano lessons, and your life becomes very clock oriented. It's part of our world. So the blog sauna guy goes, yeah, well, it's going to take longer to heat up. And you're like, well, I don't know. And it's wood heat, which means you have to go out there and actually kindle a fire. But I have done, I haven't got a count for you, I'm sorry to say, but close to 100 probably wood-fired saunas in one form or another. Over the years. And so far, I haven't heard any complaints from any of those people that the thing doesn't get warm enough.
That's actually very interesting what you just said. It's like I'm starting thinking that maybe we should like segment different saunas by how long it takes them to heat up. Because it's kind of you should like understand that if your sauna is heated up in 30 minutes, you may be compromising there somewhere, along the line. Because my dear co-hosts Christopher and Sam get bored with me telling the same stories time after time. But my father-in-law has a smoke sauna, and you are easily clocking like 4.5 hours, and it's worth every minute.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do one here. I haven't done one here, but I can get logs. So.
Yeah, I tell people sometimes, I can relate it to food as I relate all things to food. I think in food analogies, but like if someone invites you over for a Texas style brisket, and they tell you, I made this in 4 hours. If anyone who knows brisket, that's going to be a nearly impossible task. But if they tell you, I stayed up all night, it took 18 hours. I was wrapping, unwrapping, the love that went into that thing, you're probably suspecting this is going to be a pretty amazing experience.
I had a customer who was a good friend of a very good friend of mine a bunch of years ago. They had a building in their yard. They wanted to convert it to sauna. And we talked, I went and visited and we talked, and they ended up buying a stove. And one day, it was during Christmas week. It was between Christmas and New Year's. And I was in Montpelier, and I went into the coffee shop on State Street, and there sat Tim, and I went to say hello. I hadn't seen him in months. And I, chit chat, how's everyone? How are the kids? How's the family? And I said, so how has having the sauna changed the way you celebrate the holidays? And he looked at me and he said, having a sauna has changed the way we do everything. And I was like, yep, that's Devin, this is someone and I'm struggling with his last name. Anyway, prominent in the Montpelier nonprofit scene.
Yeah,
but
I think
really,
it's like anything, the more you put into it, the more you get out. And the more you embrace that ritual of cutting the wood, stacking the wood, starting the fire, tending the fire, and then you enjoy the sauna. That's what it's about. So.
yeah.
We are hitting our last 10 minutes now of the podcast. So do we have topics that we haven't covered yet?
Let's see. I just learned of maybe Devin has insight. I just learned that our Queen City recently built a new YMCA, and they have a modern electric sauna.
They do.
And a friend who swims there told me about it. Have you used it?
I have not used it. I poked my head in when it was under construction and was not too excited by what I saw.
You have to, Eero, you have to go like this while I tell the story. What they did, they made it. For me, this is an oversight, or maybe could have been more carefully planned. And I haven't been there yet, so I'm taking my friend's word for it. But basically, there's an indoor pool, all kinds of beautiful facilities. I mean, the place has gotten very high marks, fitness rooms and public community rooms and all this great stuff. But apparently, it's a co-ed sauna. The door to the sauna comes off the pool deck directly into the sauna. So what they discovered was that people were coming and going with wet bathing suits. And the first thing that you notice, the first thing that you guys are going to think of is, well, the ventilation is going to be compromised because of the location. You can't bring fresh air. You can't bring fresh air from the room with the pool in it, because typically pools will be chlorinated, and that gets into the air. But then you have wet swimsuits, and guess what the wet swimsuits are? And I'm just thinking, well, here's a beautiful idea and a great effort and concept to combine the sauna with the pool in this thing that here we are in Burlington, Vermont, where the it's winter. Winter here is serious. And as Devin will promise, winter on the lake in Burlington is tough because you're on the water and the wind, it'll it could be 40 degrees and you'll still freeze because of the cold wind with moisture. Anyhow, they did their best, but I just, why does this keep happening, Eero? There's a disconnect. There's a very beautiful one down in Woodstock, same thing that I've used. It's not the Woodstock Inn, but it's property associated with Woodstock Inn, where you leave the pool deck and go directly to the sauna.
Yeah, it's like these missed opportunities, there's something weird about the placement of the heater in that the Y sauna also. I can't remember. I looked at it and thought that's not right. But these are easy fixes. If just at the planning stage, we could say, well, maybe move that over here and maybe put it in this part of the building instead of that part of the building. Yeah. Not asking for a whole redesign of the whole project. It's just, little tweaks. But it's so hard to insert someone knowledgeable in the planning process. Mm-hmm. And it's not till it's built that you realize,
I want to hear what Sam,
quite right.
I want to hear what Sam and Christopher have to say about this, but my personal feeling is that sauna for the majority of people is still so new as a concept that many mistakes are being made. And also what we are aiming at, and that was my question before about the Finnish lock building saunas back in the day and what they were used for, and the modern sauna, what that is used for. Mm-hmm. And there are different things that they are being used for. It's like, well, we hear constantly, and Nils knows all about it. Many people use saunas at their gyms for the pre-exercise warm-up process, which many medical doctors have proved me that it doesn't do anything. And it's a problem because they are fully clothed. with sneakers and whatnot. So it's just like, that takes the sauna bathing experience from other people. But enough with me. What do you guys, Sam and Christopher, how do you feel about this?
I can feel the pain here, especially on a like a YMCA project. 99 times out of 100, a sauna professional is nowhere near anywhere in the design, to these points, Devin, you hit the nail on the head. It's not rocket science. It could be easily fixed early on, but a lot of these commercial jobs that I have ever been a part of, they're signed off. The sauna is going to be right there. It's going to be 6 by 8. And you're going to be lucky if you can lower that ceiling or not, or raise it, depending on whatever they're looking at. And it's almost dictated to us. And these are non-sauna professionals. I've had to correct 100 architectural drawings that show a sauna door swinging inward. and it's like, guys, come on. Common sense here. It's a blessing and a curse, because it's a curse because you have to deal with everybody that doesn't have it. And it's tough when you want to make these changes, but at what level and how do you go about getting in front of these people? I'd love to do a keynote speech at the Harvard Architectural School, whatever. But I don't think the sauna guys are going to get the mic anytime soon. But I'm hoping with your guys' help we can get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Devin might.
Hey, and I'm rooting. I will vote for Devin for Congress if he's gonna go for sauna.
Well, our assignment for the Sauna Ambassadors project, I'm going to evaluate the YMCA sauna in Burlington and give some feedback. Give it a shot.
Excellent.
Okay, so Risto, do you want to add something to this?
Well, I want to say that I'm a realist, but also I'm very much an optimist. People don't know what they don't know. That was our family 9 years ago. So I think it is largely a matter of education and getting the right people, finding those key people like Devin talked about in the architectural world, in the hotel world, in the health and fitness world, who get it and they understand the buffet of sauna, and then get some of those technical details right with the ventilation and all those things. And I think if we, get a few of us or many of us with megaphones out there speaking out about these things in a winsome, polite way, we can start to move things forward slowly. And I think slowly is how this is going to happen.
Good word. So I think we are almost on our last minute. So any final words, gentlemen? And before I give you the podium to say the final words, I thank you. I've enjoyed this discussion immensely. It's been a great discussion.
Nice to see everyone.
Great. Thanks for having us.
I'm looking forward to coming to Vermont because I gotta see some of these. I'm excited.
All right.
Anytime, call us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Sounds
you,
good.
everyone.
Thanks a lot.